Welcome, everybody. So glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation. My name's Paige Ponder. I'm the Senior Executive Director of the Kirsten Institute for Urban Education at the University of Chicago, and I will be your moderator today. Let's go ahead and go to the agenda slide. Here's what we have planned for you today. I'm going to provide a little bit of national context to frame our conversation. We are then going to go to Illinois level data from Mariana Barragan Torres at IWERC, the Illinois Workforce and Education Research Collaborative. We will then pass it to Elaine Allensworth from the University of Chicago Consortium to look at CPS level data on chronic absenteeism. And then we will go to a panel discussion with a principal from Chicago Public Schools, Chief of College and Career Success, and Rebecca from the Latino Policy Forum. And I will give them more introductions when we get to the panel. But it will be a really nice mix of lived experience and policy level work and district level perspective. So we're excited to dive in, and maybe we should go to the next slide with their beautiful photos. These are all of our experts that we have with us today. I'm really looking forward to you hearing from all of them. Okay, let's go to the next slide for the national context. Maybe we can go to the next one. As you are very likely well aware, since you're here, chronic absenteeism and attendance challenges are present in schools across the country, and nationally, the chronic absenteeism shot up during the pandemic and has not come down to pre-pandemic levels, is trending downward, but not as fast as we would like for it to. And so this is an important thing for us to focus on and understand why this is happening and why it matters so much. Can we go to the next slide? We are learning that attendance matters for all groups of students, from the littles and pre-K to elementary and high school students. Low attendance is linked with lower academic skills, lower grades and standardized test scores, and lower rates of high school graduation. Conversely, high attendance is linked with higher academic skills, grades and test scores, and high school graduation. So we are seeing across the country that attendance matters as much, if not more, than it did before the pandemic, and that all of the learning outcomes we care about track closely with how much students are coming to school. Next slide, please. Not only does it matter a great deal, but each day matters. So these are bar charts from NAEP scores, the National Assessment of Education Progress, often called the nation's report card, actually asks students about their own attendance in the month before they take the NAEP test. And so here we see that whether students are in 4th grade or 8th grade, whether they are eligible for free and reduced lunch or not, the highest scores are for those students who were absent 0 days. And then each additional day of absence causes scores to decrease. Now, I said cause, we don't know causal exactly. And this is self-reported data from students, but it gives us a good sense that students' attendance patterns really do impact their learning, which is picked up by this test. So this is a little bit of the national context and why this is such an important conversation for us to be having. And now let's dive into the details. And I'm going to introduce Mariana Barragan Torres from IWERC to talk about what they have found at the state level. Mariana.
Thank you so much, Bay, and thank you for having me. This is a very important topic and one that is really close to my heart. So in this report, we use data from all students in the state of Illinois to analyze attendance patterns and understand how these relate to student academic outcomes. So what did we find? Next slide, please. Thank you. So we find that absenteeism increased quite a lot during and after the onset of the pandemic. And this was true across the board, but especially for students in urban districts, students who were eligible for free or reduced price lunch, and Black students. Then controlling for both observable and unobservable characteristics, we also see that student test scores were strongly related to their absences. And as you can see here. And then third, which we can go next, thank you. We study how this relationship changed from before the onset of the pandemic in 2019 to after the height of the pandemic period in 2023. And we found that the relationship between test scores and attendance for Illinois students is even stronger in the post-pandemic years. So let's get into some detail. So this graph shows how the number of days absent increased for everyone in Illinois. But students in cities experience higher increases in the number of days they were absent in school. Yes, they start higher in the first place, which is important to recognize, but they also increase the most from before the pandemic period to after. Next slide. In terms of student outcomes, in this case, math IAR test scores, which is the state assessment, and it's given to all students in grades 3 through 8 in Illinois, we see a direct relation between test scores and the number of days absence. So for example, in 2019 in green, students with less than 5 absences scored on average 700 points in math. But students with 11 to 15 absences, these are students who are not even chronically absent, the average score was 728 points. So that is about 12 points lower. And for students in the next category, so those who are chronically absent, the average was 716 points. So that is 24 points lower than those students who had less than 5 absences. This graph includes averages for all students in Illinois from grades 3 through 8, but findings vary across grade, as we'll see in the next slide. So this table may look overwhelming, there's a lot of numbers, but it's very simple. It just represents how much the IAR test scores, again, the state test, decrease for each additional day students are missing. And they're missing from school. And these results are controlling for all student characteristics, both observable and unobservable in each grade. So let's take a look at the table on the right. So for math in 2019, students in third grade, so that's the first column of that table, lost about 20.26 points for each day they missed in school. But in 2023, so that's at the bottom of the table, this decrease was 0.31 points, so about 0.5 points more that they lose for each additional day they're missing from school. Towards the end of the table, in grade A, we can see that the decrease went from 0.29 points in 2019 to losing 0.33 points in 2023. Again, for each additional day students are missing in school, from school. So in conclusion, student attendance still matters for student learning. And now let's see how attendance relates to other academic and non-academic outcomes in the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. Your findings help us understand how attendance patterns are showing up across Illinois. And so now let's double click into Chicago Public Schools. And I'm very pleased to turn it over to Elaine Allensworth from the consortium to take us through their recent findings.
Thank you very much, Paige. I'm so happy to be here. Rosa, can you move to the next slide? So we looked at absenteeism in Chicago Public Schools in the years following the COVID-19 pandemic. And just to give a quick overview, we found, not surprisingly, as we've seen in other places, absenteeism increased considerably after COVID. And it's not just that there were more students who were chronically absent, but that absenteeism increased across the board so that more students had very high absence rates, and then fewer students had very low absence rates. Next finding. And this really matters because we have found in the past that absenteeism is strongly related to student achievement, and we find that students' academic achievement is still strongly related to their absences in post-COVID years. Next finding. So, we've had these questions. Well, if absenteeism is up everywhere, and we know there have been a lot of changes in society, and we know that a lot of factors that are outside of the school affect absenteeism, is there anything that schools could do? One thing we found when we looked at the data is that there were large differences across schools in their absence rates, in how much their absence rates changed from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic years, and that we still saw large differences even when we compared similar students attending similar schools, comparing students from the same neighborhoods. And I'll go into that in a second. And then finally, we started asking, well, we see these differences across schools. What is it that schools are doing that makes a difference? There are a lot of different things we could be looking at here. I'm sure there are a lot of different practices that matter, but we started off looking at school climate and students and teachers' reports on the 5 essential surveys. And what we found is that some of these differences across schools were related to what students and teachers said about their experiences in their school. In particular, students' reports of safety, their relationships with peers and with teachers, reports about the value they see in their classes and whether they have to work hard to succeed, and then what teachers said about their relationships with parents. And I should say, when we did these analyses, we really tried to deal with the fact that there's students with different backgrounds go to different schools. We tried to take all of those different factors into consideration, even taking into consideration students' attendance in prior years to see whether their attendance changed based on which school they attended. And even when we do all that, we find that school climate makes a difference. Next slide. So before I go into the details, just to say some of our main takeaways are that attendance matters as much as ever. Next one. Schools can and do influence students' attendance. And next one. Improving school climate helps improve students' current and future learning and success. And I should say we see this in this study, and we've seen it in other studies looking at data in pre-pandemic years. Next slide. Now I'll get into the details. So this slide shows absence rates for students in 6th grade and 9th grade, broken down by the 3 years prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, 2017, 2018, 2019, and then the 3 years post-pandemic, 22, 2023, and 2024. The blue categories here represent students who are chronically absent. So if you look at all the increase in the percentages in the blue categories here, those represent students who are absent 10% or more days of school. So those are students who are counted as chronically absent. If you add up all those little blue percentages, you'll see that in 2024, 45%, almost half of students in grade 9 were chronically absent. That means they were missing 10% or more of school days. But it's not just that we have more students who are missing at least 10% of school days, but you can see those very dark blue box segments have grown more. And those are students who are missing 20% or even more than that of school days. So we not only have more students who are chronically absent, missing 10% or more of school, but we now have sizable numbers of students who are missing 20% or more. And for students who are missing 20% or more of school, they are highly at risk of not graduating high school. And then on top of that, if you click ahead, if you look at the green segments, those show the very light green at the very top shows the percentage of students who were absent less than 5% of school days. And we see also big differences with many fewer students much smaller percentages of students who are absent less than 5% of school days. This also matters because we have a lot of research that shows that the students who end up college ready with the strong grades and high likelihood of success when they get to college tend to be the students with very high attendance when they're in middle school and high school. Okay, next slide. So I said it matters, it still matters. These are just some descriptive figures showing the relationship between students' test scores in 6th grade and 9th grade and their absence rates in 6th grade and 9th grade. And I'll say we also have some more rigorous analyses that we've been doing to see if the relationship still holds. And yes, absences still matter post-pandemic. If you look at these figures, you'll see that the lines are right on top of each other. Students with higher absence rates, so those are going further to the right of each figure, have lower test scores, and the relationships are almost identical in the post-pandemic years, represented by the darker lines, compared to the pre-pandemic years, represented by the lighter lines. Unfortunately, so the relationship is the same, but we have many more students who are now further to the right in those figures, missing more school, and so test scores are lower on average. Next slide. So this slide shows the same thing, but now we're looking at students' grade point averages and looking at the relationship between absences and grade point averages. In this case, the lines are not right on top of each other because all students have higher grades, higher GPAs post-pandemic than in pre-pandemic years. There are many possible reasons for this. We see it across the board, even among students who have perfect attendance, they have higher grades. And that's something we need to look into. But the thing I want you to pay attention to is the slope of the lines, the relationship between having higher absences and students' grades. And the slope of the lines are very similar, right? So students who are absent more have lower grades on average. Next slide. So we see that absences matter. We also see that it matters what school you go to. These figures show absence rates for every school that serves grades 6 through 8 or that serves grades 9 through 11 in Chicago. And it shows their absence rates in pre-pandemic years on the horizontal axis and their absence rates in post-pandemic years on the vertical axis. The dots that are on the vertical line that goes through, those represent schools that saw no increase in absence rates in post-pandemic years. So there were some schools where absence rates did not change with the pandemic. On the other hand, there are some schools where the dots are way above the vertical line by 10 percentage points or even more. Those are schools that showed big increases in absence rates with the pandemic. So there were a lot of differences across schools in terms of how much their absence rates change. And we did further analyses that really tried to take into account students' backgrounds, their prior absences in earlier years, their prior achievement, what neighborhood they lived in, all kinds of different factors. And when we still see there are these large differences across schools, it seems like what schools do really makes a difference. So next slide. One of the things we looked at was school climate and what students said about their experiences in their schools and what teachers said about their experiences in their schools. And we see there are these significant relationships between factors such as students' reports of safety in and around the school, their safety or the lack of bullying and teasing by their peers, their relationships with peers, how much they feel connected to school, how much they trust teachers, how much their peers, believe and support in academic work, the support they get from teachers, how the academic press, meaning how hard you have to work to do well in the class, all of these things. The schools that were higher, where students reported higher on these measures, had lower absence rates, even after taking out all the differences that could be explained by differences in who attends different schools. And then we also saw that teachers' reports about their relationships with parents actually made a significant difference at both the high school and the middle grade level. Here we're just looking at high schools. We see similar patterns in the middle grades, although there's smaller differences in absence rates in schools serving the middle grades. Again, we see the same kinds of climate measures matter in both high school and in the middle grades. And this is for showing the relationships in post-pandemic years. A lot of these climate measures are related to absences in pre-pandemic years as well, but the relationships are smaller. School climate and relationships and students' perceptions of their classes, all of these things seem to matter more in post-pandemic years than in pre-pandemic years. Next slide. So just key takeaways again, we find attendance matters as much as ever. Keep going. It really looks like schools can and do influence students' attendance, and we have even more work going on looking at this further. And improving school climate matters a lot, and it's an effective way to improve students' absences and their learning and success. And it matters more in post-pandemic years.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you so much for sharing that, and really exciting findings that schools can have such an effect. This is an incredibly complex issue. Certainly, many students and families have challenges that make it difficult for them to go to school every day, but schools are incredibly powerful and teacher relationships are incredibly powerful. So that's exciting news. We will now turn to our panel discussion, and I'm really excited to get our panelists engaged in this conversation. If you have questions, our esteemed attendees, please put those in the Q&A or the question section in the webinar. We're not going to be able with 170 folks to have open Q&A, but we will record your questions. We're also going to have an exit ticket for you at the end where you can let us know what your questions are. Clearly, this is going to be an ongoing conversation amongst all of us, and we really would love your input and what you're thinking about. So I'm so excited to welcome our panel. We can go to the next slide again with their photos. We have Dr. Megan Hogard, who is Chief of College and Career Readiness at Chicago Public Schools. We have Rebecca Vonderlack Navarro, who is the Vice President of Education Policy and Research at the Latino Policy Forum, and Angelica Altamirano, who is the principal of Hubbard High School. Thank you so much for joining us, all of you. Okay, so let's get started. Thinking about the data, the findings, the patterns, the implications that were just shared by our research partners, what are you seeing and hearing from students and families and educators? What is feeling most challenging right now, and what seems to be helping more students come and attach to school? Dr. Hogard, we will start with you.
Thank you so much, Paige. So as you were talking about this, I'm thinking a lot about that. This is year 20 for me in CPS. I've been a teacher, an administrator. I was a network chief along with Angelica through the pandemic. And what we were hearing from students then is the same thing we're hearing a lot now of students want to feel connected to school. They want to feel supported. And I think the attendance is complex. You need the entire district to be organized around attendance. And we've been doing a lot of work around how can we support principals and how can central office be organized to provide those supports. And I think I hear so much from principals around how can we de-silo our work so we can be supporting schools holistically. And the data really reflects that schools need to be supported holistically so they can work holistically with students.
Thank you. Rebecca, can I go to you next?
Yeah, and thanks again for having, highlighting this really important topic. I've been worried about it for a really long time, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. We've definitely been hearing from leaders across the state that Illinois schools continue to struggle with absenteeism post-pandemic. And we're hearing this just like what the research showed today, that among high school, low-income, Black and Latino students, this is really a struggle. From student perspectives, we're hearing mental health needs, family responsibilities, and just an overall lack of engagement with school, just not feeling connected with school. Parents are citing, just like we saw, safety as being a real issue, along with unreliable transportation, economic pressures, homelessness. And sometimes we don't talk about homelessness in terms of doubled up housing, but that can also be an issue for families. We know that safety has been a longstanding issue, but recently ICE raids in the city and state have incited a chilling effect across many communities. Then there's so many diligent educators really just trying their best to re-engage students. But in terms of promoting student attendance, research really points to relationship-driven strategies. And this came up during the presentation. I'm sure we're going to be bringing this up throughout. But things like schools adopting proactive family outreach, like home visits, integrating health in community schools, school health clinics, counseling, social work services. And then also this really important role of extracurricular opportunities. We know these peer relationships are so important. Clubs, sports, enrichment programs. I also want to think outside of schools. Obviously, schools are so important. It's a both and, but there's also a really important role for business leaders, faith communities, and building mentorship, right? And providing that relational support. I mean, I think the bottom line is that students need to feel safe. They need to feel valued. They need to feel respected. And so I think we really need to be getting this information that's shared today out to families, out to community leaders. I think we need a PSA on this. I know I've been thinking a lot about this at our organization, but I genuinely think we need to make a statewide campaign on this. It really is a big deal to go to school, and it's having an impact on student outcomes.
Thank you, Rebecca. Angelica, please join us.
Absolutely. And I do want to say I'm in my school setting and it is passing period, so you might hear some of that rumbling in the background. I just want to start by saying that Hubbard has been my home for 25 years. So for me, this is my work every single day. I am very proud of the attendance that we have. We actually ended almost at pre-pandemic numbers. We're at 87% compared to 90%, which was pre-pandemic. So for us, we definitely are doing a lot of that work every single day. What we have heard from the students is that they're telling us that they show up when they feel seen. So I do agree with what Rebecca was saying. I do agree with what Megan was saying. That is definitely the climate and the culture in the building is what will draw the students here every single day. And that is the reason why they are showing up. From our families, we are hearing that the anxiety around economic instability, around the immigration enforcement that is occurring directly outside of my doors, right in my neighborhood, that is a real reason as to why our students might not be showing up. And then from my educators, work is hard. This is exhausting work. This is every single day. This is every single day doing the right thing for our students and for our community. And at the end of the day, they need to understand that we, as the administrators, are here as their partners in this work, and that we value them and that we value what they do. But, doing things like for our students that are not coming through the door for various reasons, my educators are hosting virtual office hours. My educators are showing up on Saturdays to do Saturday Academy to make sure that my kids can stay on track with grades. It might not be helping that attendance at that moment, but it is helping in creating that environment where my students then want to come through the door afterwards and improve with attendance. There are still some challenges that we see when some of my students have to choose between picking up a shift at work to help parents pay bills, or coming in and staying the entire day through 7th and 8th period electives. My students are going to choose to work to help pay bills and help the families out. So I do understand some of those challenges, and I'm really happy to have been given this opportunity to be able to speak more about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thinking about, again, kind of focusing in on pre-pandemic and comparing, contrasting to now, how is the issue of attendance different today compared to kind of the before times? What do you feel has fundamentally changed? What challenges feel new or more intense now? And I'm going to go to Rebecca first.
Yeah, from a policy perspective, how student attendance is viewed and treated today is really fundamentally different than pre-pandemic. And some of what I'm going to describe is really an emphasis in terms that are used and the approaches attached to those terms. Too often, especially in popular media, we hear the words chronic absenteeism and truancy used interchangeably. Before the COVID pandemic, attendance policy really was focused on truancy compliance and seat time requirements. And truancy really refers to unexcused absences. So that can be skipping school, that can be some sort of violation. The approach to resolving the problem was compliance focused, usually leaving it up to front office administrators. The focus tended to be punitive and focused on the individual student. So you might have heard of too many absences can lead to a suspension, which is then more time out. Or I'm sure we've all heard of cases of pushing a student to drop out, right? So they're not even on the enrollment. In some states, we've heard of fining parents whose kids are absent. Now, post-pandemic, thankfully, Illinois policy conversations have increasingly centered on chronic absenteeism, and we're hearing that on the panel today as well, and really seeing it as an early warning indicator tied to equity, academic recovery, and mental health. Chronic absenteeism is different from truancy approaches because it incorporates all absences. It's looking at excused, unexcused, and suspensions. So instead of being punitive, the focus is academic and on the well-being of students. It focuses on the loss of instructional time, health concerns, or homelessness. And this is important because chronic absenteeism approaches in their ideal form, I'm not saying everyone's gotten there and that it's perfect, but in their ideal form, recognize that students can miss school for very valid reasons. Angelica just was pointing out to some of those, and they shouldn't be treated harshly, right? And instead, we need to be looking for more comprehensive approaches to prevent absences so students don't fall behind. And we're seeing state and district leaders shifting from these punitive approaches toward these more prevention-oriented strategies. And I think we see that in family engagement, community schools, integrated supports. Angelica just talked about that important relationship building, because I think we don't want to make the assumption. I think we really want to put it out there and state it that we want to recognize attendance as a systems issue rather than solely a student or family failure. And that's a really important paradigm shift.
Megan, I'm curious how you want to build on that from the district perspective.
I appreciate that. And I mean, we've been partners as a district with UChicago for a long time. We've had great research to inform our practices and have built strong practices like the freshman on track work and thinking about our, the to and through continuum of how do we support students. And our district really has a stance that we believe in the ability of all of our students, and it's our role to create the conditions where they can thrive. I think, the chronic absenteeism has been a bit of a blunt instrument lately, and it's complex because you can't recover it. Once you're chronically absent as a student, you run out of a runway and you can't recover it. And so I get nervous when and I'm always thinking at the school level, I don't want any student to feel like you're past the point of improvement. And so that's where I would say one of our biggest shifts is we need to get back to looking at talking about attendance as a positive metric and emphasizing, yes, there's conditions where you may not be able to be in school, but school is still the best place for you. And the best learning will happen when you're in a supportive school community like Hubbard with all of the wraparound support you can have. And I think that place, how do we do both, is an important place for us to be as a district. And Rebecca was talking about setting up these expectations of how we're thinking about reciprocal responsibility, reciprocal accountability. As a district, our school ratings structure disappeared and was replaced by a mutual shared accountability system. And so as we talk about moving towards how do we think about attendance in a different way, we're also saying, how are we as a central office responsible for creating those conditions as well? I know that the emphasis on support is really important, and we also need that emphasis of how Zaretta Hammond talks about the warm demander. We need to help people get back to school is the best place, and having those conversations in a supportive way, not in a zero tolerance or a deficit model way.
Angelica, curious how you would add some more nuance at the school level to that.
No, absolutely. I agree with, both of you. And we have seen that shift. So here at the high school level, and specifically here at Hubbard, we have definitely seen that shift. Pre-pandemic, it was very punitive. Pre-pandemic, there was a lot of discipline involved and penalizing students for attendance. And it was very black and white. Like, you're either in school or you're not in school because you choose to not be in school. Post-pandemic, obviously, it's more about those wraparound supports. It's about having conversations with students and families and understanding the reason behind why a student has not shown up, why a student is chronically truant, and bringing everyone together to be able to provide those supports to then, they may not be out of being chronically truant. However, we can still help them be successful in school. We can still help them successfully complete their courses and graduate from high school with a plan post-secondary. So it has shifted. We've had those conversations with parents. We've had a lot of empathy interviews with our students to understand, what are those barriers? What is keeping a student away from the building? Is it us? Is it something else? Is it external? How can we support? So before, when we used to call and ask a parent, why is your child not in the building? Now we're calling and we're asking, how can we support? How can we get them through the door? What do we need to do? What do you need from us? So those conversations have changed the dynamic, the culture, and that's how we've seen an improvement.
So continuing to build on your comments, Angelica, the consortium's research really highlights that schools can and do influence attendance patterns, especially through, as you said, students' experiences in school, and particularly through the climate and culture. So tell us more, maybe give us a little bit more depth on, I assume this finding is not surprising to you. You're already doing a lot of this work. I think everyone on the call would love to know more about how you're going about building the climate and culture that is keeping students in school.
Paige, we don't have enough time in the day to get through everything. It is a lot of work, and you are absolutely right. And from way back when Megan was my chief, and she understood the work that we were doing. So it has been 8 years with this administration. We have gone through the pandemic. We are post-pandemic and trying to make this school the best school for my students in the course of 4 years. So with that being said, the idea is to have the school that I wish that I had when I was a high schooler. And in doing that, I understand that it is about, building trust with my students and with my families. My students come through the door every single day because they have all identified a trusted adult in this building. That may not just be the teacher, that may not just be the security officer or the coach, it can be the custodial worker. It is anybody. It does not quite matter as long as they can identify someone. They feel valued, they feel seen. We have done a lot of work with intentionally planning spaces for our students. We created a healing center post-pandemic because we knew that my students, my staff, and my families needed a space to be able to come through the door and have a brain break and have a meeting space where they can meet like-minded peers and they can have conversations about what they were going through. And it might be about social and emotional support. It might be about dealing as a parent, or how to be a parent to a high schooler, or it might be a staff meeting about classroom management. But we've created those spaces intentionally for our community to be able to come through the door and say, we hear you, we value you, we see you, we are here for you. We've also done a lot of work with community building and mindset shift here in the building. You know, there are a lot of educators that went through school and did not quite understand the approaches that we are now doing here in school now, right? We went through school and we were taught, and it was very different from what we are going through right now. So when we talk about restorative justice and we talk about restorative approaches here within a school community and building belonging, a lot of us didn't go through that. A lot of us didn't have those supports. So we are now educating our educators to then be the best person and the best version of themselves to be able to do this for our students and to be able to create those environments every single day for our students and for our community. But we are also elevating the student voice. And this is the biggest piece here. My students are involved in everything, every single day. I practice an open door policy. My kids come through the door. They know that I have a snack bin and it says 2 snacks max in Spanish and in English. And they also know that on the door, I have something that says need supplies, take them. My students know where to find support and resources. But that's just not me. That's everyone in this building. So we have created an environment where there is trust, there is community, and students, staff, and families know that they feel welcome and they feel valued and they belong here at Hubbard High School. And I really wish that this is something that could be done across every single school, because the data has proven that our numbers have gone up. Our attendance went up, like I said, 87% at the end of the semester, and our 9th grade on track went up to 91% at the end of the semester as well. So it is work. It is exhausting work, but we will continue doing it because we love this place. We love Hubbard High School.
Thank you. Megan, clearly you and Angelica have a long and trusting partnership. So how would you build on what she shared from your perch at the district?
Oh my gosh. So first of all, so honored to be in this space together. But what Angelica didn't mention is that she's also offering advanced courses for all students and not excluding students and saying, oh, you now below the threshold. You know, they're not weaponizing attendance, they're not excluding students. And sometimes I think we get a little caught up in what the bar is to have advanced coursework, to have a choice and have decision making around your own education. And then we start funneling out those students who we don't think deserve to be there or don't make the cutoff. And what you don't see at Hubbard is that approach. You see the school being intentional on how do I get all students in these opportunities, because those opportunities that they choose and are supported to be successful in are what keep them coming to school. And elementary attendance and high school attendance are very different. Elementary, you take attendance once a day. High school, you take attendance each period. If you're not engaged in your high school periods, you may not be in every period as a student. You might be less likely to start your day on time. So there's a lot more in the meeting the student needs at high school that's different. On the elementary side, we've seen great success at the district level with our early childhood team working with my office around attendance and around family and community engagement. And so knowing that we need to pull different levers to support different grade bands and different schools is really important too. And the principal knows best in what their school needs, along with the students having strong student voice committees, having strong parent advisory committees, really seeing that as school community as the unit of change that we need to support at the district level is really important.
You know, Rebecca, what would you add at the policy level?
Yeah, so really inspiring to hear all these relationship-driven strategies. It just shows how important it is. And I wanted to complement it with some state-level policy that we've been enacting that we hope it will support attendance. We worked with peer advocates for the enactment of the Illinois Safe Schools for All Act. And the law works to codify protections that within Plyer versus Doe in the school level. So the law states that schools and programs can't exclude students from school based on immigration status, nor request social security numbers, nor can threats be made to disclose a student's immigration status. And we're thinking a law like this can potentially strengthen student attendance by codifying protections to ensure all students, regardless of immigration status, can enroll and remain in school without this fear of ICE enforcement actions. And so we're thinking a lot about this as policy advocates in terms of disseminating statewide guidance, in terms of training for educators. We're thinking about a video campaign for parents so they can understand their rights and protections. But we also know that in general, that safety is not just an immigrant issue, right? This came out throughout the research. Fundamentally, when students and families trust that schools are safe spaces free from surveillance or discrimination, students are more likely to attend regularly, engage academically, and maintain stable school enrollment. So I think that's just a really important thing to be thinking about. Came out loud and clear in the presentation. And Megan alluded to this a bit, but I know a lot of our conversation today has been K through 12 focused, and it totally makes sense. But I'd be remiss because both UChicago Consortium on School Research and IWERC, both of them have work that shows that setting the stage for strong attendance begins in preschool. And we're often forgetting about that. That early childhood component is so important. And some of that has a policy component. We know that full day programming makes a huge difference. We also know 2 years of it can make a huge difference. So starting at age 3 versus age 4, half day is really hard for working parents. It's like I say, enough time to get nothing done, right? It's just really hard to do that. So I think as a policy organization, we're constantly thinking about, well, first of all, we're using research from the consortium and IWERC to say, this works for kids. Attendance, full day preschool can work for attendance. It can work for later test scores. And we need to increase the number of slots that are full day, that are high quality. So those are ways we're thinking about it at a policy level to really provide a foundation for a lot of the work that Megan and Angelica are speaking of.
Thank you. And you've really just teed up our next question quite beautifully. Thank you, which is, what do we really need today? What are we prioritizing in terms of the next most important things we can do to address this issue, both at the district and at the state policy level and at the school level with community collaboration, or however you're prioritizing what your next bites of the apple, as they say, are in your sphere. So, Angelica, can I start with you? What's on your mind for your next moves at the school level?
I continue advocating. Like I stated, Hubbard is my home, and I go to any resource possible. So connections with elected officials, connections with every resource available through CPS, connections with partner agencies, community-based organizations. We became a sustainable community school this year, and I'm very proud of that work. So partnering, truly making this the hub of the community. I know what a Gem Hubbard High School is. It is time that we expand and people further away from the neighborhood are aware of what we are doing here for our students. This is hard work. Like I stated, this is work that we continue doing. You roll up your sleeves. It's all hands on deck every single day, but our students are worth it. They are wonderful. They are wonderful, and their success is our success. My oldest son graduated from Hubbard High School. I'm very proud of that. He chose us over other schools, and this is the work that we do every single day. Every child that walks in through the door, we want to make sure that they have that positive experience. We are a school that moved away from compliance to connection. And we understand that when a student feels missed in the building, they feel valued. And when a student feels valued, they show up. And that's where we're at right now. Our students are showing up because they feel valued. So just continuing connections, Paige. And I think that one thing that is always needed is funding to be able to continue doing the work that we are doing, funding to be able to pay educators to stay after school, to continue leading clubs, to come in on Saturdays, to do Saturday academies for our students, to come in early for mornings in the library. Funding is always nice.
Well, I'm going to give that right to our district leader, Megan.
Oh my gosh, that's what I was going to say.
Okay.
No, but I think so. One really important point that Angelica made is our out of school time, after school funding is a direct source of funding to schools. We have seen during the returning from the pandemic, the ESSER funds that we had that were a direct correlation. The money that went to the schools, dollar per dollar, the more students were engaged after school. And I think, we make things very complicated. And sometimes you really just need the funds to have the clubs. And schools, as we were saying, principals are working really hard. Every staff member in a school, teachers, our student support staff are working really hard. And our partners, many of our partners rely on the same funding sources that we rely on. So that can be a double whammy when they're losing funds and the district's losing funds. So really understanding the ecosystem of we need all of the partners, and we need to have schools be able to use funds for what is different and unique to meet their school community's needs.
Yeah. Rebecca.
And I can kind of complement this from a state level policy perspective. I'm collaborating with a lot of peer advocates where we're thinking about state school improvement systems within the ESSA plan. And what we want out of accountability is to define consistent attendance using research-based thresholds that reflect the level of attendance needed to really do well academically. And that was talked about in the presentation today. Under the current metrics, students can miss roughly 10% of school. That's around 18 days and still be counted positively. And when we know that the research that was shown today, that missing as few as 5 to 10 days can have a measurable negative impact on academic outcomes. So we really want to push that. Research is driving the show. And another idea, this is something that Advance Illinois has been leading on, and they're a really important partner for us, is that rather than having a snapshot view of attendance every single year, consider growth of attendance over time. So schools are recognized for genuine improvement with students most at risk. Yeah, Megan's snapping, I like it. This approach would better capture sustained improvement, especially for schools that are serving students with high mobility or chronic absence challenges. And so we could align accountability with long-term progress rather than short-term volatility.
Wow. I will do I'll do just a final, really quick round, and I'll include Elaine and Mariana in this too. One thing you want to underscore, the main thing you want folks who tuned in for this webinar to walk away remembering. Anybody ready? Elaine.
Sure. I'll just say a lot of times I hear people say, oh, yeah, attendance is important. But in the same breath, they'll say, oh, but do you really need to be there every day? And I think the thing I want people to come away with is, yes, it really, really matters. And it matters for the individual student, but it also matters for their peers in the school, because when you have when you have everyone showing up every day, it's a lot easier to build those strong relationships and to have that strong instruction that feels relevant, that students, feel like they're going to miss out on if they're not there.
I can follow that. And I think that I would also reiterate, you've read in some like op-eds and in different places, in different states using different data that attendance doesn't matter as much after the height of the pandemic. I think we have local data, Illinois data, Chicago data to demonstrate that it does, that it still matters, that it matters the same or more depending on, the thresholds that we talk about. And so understanding that school attendance promotes a lot more than just test scores, a lot of just, the school community that students really thrive on and crave. So I think it's really important that to have that as a final takeaway.
Thank you. Rebecca, please.
Yeah, I can talk that. I think what I was talking about earlier about these terms, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal, truancy, chronic absenteeism, but really when we connect to the meaning of those terms and their approaches, I do think it's really important that we're really conceptualizing this as a community issue. I would argue a state issue, that we're thinking about collaborating with medical providers on health issues, that we're thinking about transit leaders on transportation issues, that we're thinking about housing agencies when it comes to children's homelessness. And I think Megan brought it up too. This issue of funding is so critical, and we're seeing it so volatile right now in so many ways. But really conceptualizing this is not something that solely lands on teachers, solely lands on schools, or solely lands on families or an individual student, but really coming together to figure out holistically and comprehensively what's going on.
Thank you. Megan, maybe you go, and then we'll give Angelica the last word.
Yes, I just really want to keep in mind how we're thinking about each individual student. And I really appreciated the graph or the visual that I'm going to go back to from this research again and again is the line with the school dots around it. And really seeing that there are great practices. I mean, I don't want to assume where Hubbard is on that graph, but I have some ideas. But there are great practices happening, and people are working really hard, and we really care about our students and communities, and it's still hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we, zoom back out, keep thinking like these are individual student stories, and this is a really tough issue that is going to take time for us to continue to push towards. And we still have students in front of us immediately who need this support now.
Thank you. Angelica.
Yes, I was going to say that as a principal, we have to remember that we are not just managing a building, that we are curating a community where every student, every single student feels like this school was built specifically for them.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can do that, we can get the students to the door.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Please do fill out the exit ticket. We want to hear from you. We answered as many of your questions as we could. Thank you, Bronwyn, in the chat. And this is an ongoing conversation that we will all continue to have together for the benefit of our children in our city. And as somebody who has the privilege of working in this space, and as a CPS parent myself, I value each of you so much, everyone who joined and everyone who is on the panel and part of the webinar today. Thank you so much for this great conversation.